So you went to the crossroads, but you did you make
Yes.
a deal with the devil, or did you just did you see him over there
I
on
didn't.
the
It was
corner?
like I looked at the paperwork. I said, we need some revisions here. No, I studied on that stuff too. And a lot of that coming over from Africa. The sort of those native tribal religions mixing with the European Catholicism, and really it kind of got conflated there. There was a guy named Legba, which is sort of this trickster character that the West African people is sort of like a party, like a Bacchus, in the Western mythology, and he could party all night long and sleep with women and sing songs and then wake up in the morning, and probably play a couple sets of tennis, but everybody trying to keep up with him was like, oh my God, who is this guy? I thought I saw him one night actually walking along Highway 49 there, and he had a really nice hat on. And I looked back and the guy was gone, and I was like, that was a little weird. Where'd that guy go?
Oh, wow.
It's kind of spooky down there, sometimes at night, but there's some good people down there. I've been down there and played gigs since then, and actually was slated to play the Juke Joint Festival here, with Roger Stoll and the Cathead down there, put on a Juke Joint Festival, and it got canceled. It was mid-April, and all this the sci-fi global, quarantine, corona, whatever's going on here now, happened, and I just, I thought I was actually with the, try to be diplomatic here with the leader of the free world, as they say. I was like, oh, maybe it'll open up by Easter. And of course, I had a big gig on Easter, being the Red, taking advantage of that. And it was just like, no, that.
Well, your new CD, Bodhisattva Blues, dropped during the quarantine, didn't it? So that's kind of inconvenient for you. What's your plan B with your new?
Betsy over at Blind Raccoon, and also my old-time friend and partner, Carmen, Los Dude, the Amazing Joe, Radio Joe, who hooked us up. And we were just already doing it, so we thought, okay, let's put it out there in the universe. And it's actually turned out to be, I think, sort of maybe a comfort. There's some Grateful Dead tunes on there. There's some old blues tunes the Dead used to do. There's a Reverend Gary Davis tune. There's some tunes that might be of comfort. And actually, it was quite nice. We were talking about how I'm pursuing the actual reverendness of the Master Divinity. And one of my professors, who's this really famous poet, Andrew Schelling, I sent him a copy of the CD, and he said, hey, Rev, I really thank you for this, because I actually had not one, but two friends. He's an old guy, but these friends were much older, I think. Maybe at the time, it was affecting a lot of older people. Two people that passed away from this corona crap.
Ooh.
And he said he put on the CD, and by the time he got to Death Don't Have No Mercy, which is an old, Reverend Gary Davis tune that the Grateful Dead, did. Actually, I think the first version I heard was the Grateful Dead version on that Live Dead CD when I was a kid. But he said it was a great comfort to him, and it's more of a meditation tune. We got Jay Collins, who played with Greg Allman and now plays with Little Feat, or will probably hopefully go back to playing with Little Feat once they start gigging again here. He played bansuri, which is this like Indian meditation flute. So it was really nice to hear that. It's like, wow, these songs should be, not only for profit, but hopefully the prophets, speak through me a little bit, and maybe that comforts some people here on planet Earth, going through some hard times. So yeah, we're just continuing, doing some phoners and like this, and playing some virtual gigs. So and working on the final thesis for the Master Divinity, so keeping myself busy and walking out on the creek and listening to the whispers of the wisdom there.
Huh. You mentioned the bansuri flute and meditation music, and when I think of bansuri flute, I don't think of the Grateful Dead, and I don't think of the blues. So it's interesting that you make that connection. Maybe you could explain that a little bit for me.
Well, this is I thank you for that observation, because I was telling this. I think I was doing an on-air interview in Dallas, Texas, when I was on tour last summer. Or maybe it was the summer before, but talking about this album. And Mark Caron, who had played with Bob Weir for years in Rat Dog, we made fast friends and had this great conversation one time. Eating chicken and waffles in Fairfax, Marin County there one morning. Or was it almost afternoon, I think. And we were talking about our love of the blues, and I was saying to this DJ, I said, I'm talking with Mark and thinking about putting a blues album together. And I said, yeah, it'll probably be kind of like straight ahead blues. And he just looked at me like, I don't think it's going to be straight ahead. I've heard your music. You always do some strange twist, And I was like, yeah, it seems straight ahead to me. I mean, it makes sense to do, an old Reverend Gary Dietz tune, that he did finger picking, do it slide, and then have my friend Jay play some, Bansuri on it. So it makes it sort of like, wow, this is really contemplating death, and it's actually a meditation on death. And when you meditate on death, like this Lakota medicine man I have, I work with, he says it makes life more precious. You know what I mean? I mean, it can get heavy, but also it can be very rejoicing. So it makes sense to me. But yeah, for somebody to be like, dude, what are you trying to do? Like, it doesn't really. In my mind, it makes sense. And I don't know how much of a deadhead you are, and I've kind of come out of the closet, a little bit as the deadhead, that I am. I've always sort of kept that close to the chest, but I've done tons of shows, and I know some of these guys, like Mark and Melvin that have played with the extended Grateful Dead family and blah, 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 But, I was of the generation, this generation now is like, goes and sees Dead and Co., and they're like, oh, wow, what was it like to see Jerry? I was in, the late 80s watching Jerry going, what was it like to see him with Pigpen? So I was a big fan of Pigpen. Yeah. And they were a blues band. You had this guy, doing Big Boss Man, and hard to handle, and these great blues tunes, and apparently he was just really could work the crowd. And you listen to these old, bootlegs of him and Janis Joplin, or just him working the crowd, all over America and Europe, and what a consummate performer. And he's like, I think he was part of the 27 Club, wasn't he? I mean, he died really young. And here's a guy that, his father was they called him race records back at the time. His dad was a DJ playing race records, so he was just inundated with that. And I had a little bit of that myself. My dad was a huge fan of the blues, and my mom was a classical pianist, so she tried to turn me into one of those when I was a kid. But that didn't really take. So my dad would be like, hey, let's go for a drive. And he played me Muddy Waters. And, he was a really big fan of all the harp players, like Sonny Boy Williamson. And so when I came around and started listening to Grateful Dead with my friends, and getting high and dropping acid and stuff, they'd be like, wow, isn't the Grateful Dead awesome? I'd be like, dude, this is an old Jimmy Reed tune. This is Big Boss Man. And they're like, no, it's the Grateful Dead. I'm like, no. The song is an old Jimmy Reed song, So Mark and I had this conversation about maybe taking some of these Grateful Dead tunes and bringing them back to the blues, So like an example of our version of Big Boss Man, it starts out with the Jimmy Reed harmonica instead of sort of like that Jared Garcia, intro. And then Hugh Poole plays some amazing harmonica on that. If you don't know him, he's a great blues guy. He's sort of a hit blues guru out of New York City. And he actually, we recorded a bunch of the album there at his studio, and he mixed the album. But he plays sort of a Jimmy Reed, not to get too technical here, but he plays a third position, real high notes of the harmonica, sort of mimicking Jimmy Reed. And then, we let Mark Karen, who's, played with all these Grateful Dead dudes, solo for two choruses with Melvin Seals playing organ under him. So it was sort of like mixing these worlds again, like, hey man, the Grateful Dead were a blues band. They used to play strip clubs when they were starting out,
Yeah.
And of course they persevered through all the different incarnations of drug use and musical genres, 70s with disco stuff, and I loved their dark period in the 90s with Victim of the Crime. And I mean, it's a shame that Garcia sort of went out in the deep end there, didn't come back. I mean, but I guess they're moving on with different incarnations and stuff like that now too.
Well, I see that you have there's a picture on your album, Bodhisattva Blues,
yes.
of you at Pigpen's gravestone.
Yeah, I was going to visit my cousin who works. He's building those self-driving cars for Ford, and he was there. It's like south of the Bay, someplace. I forget the town, but it was a huge cemetery. And of course, I just walked up there. I had free afternoon, and I was going to go meet my cousin, like I said, for dinner, and I was like, man, I'd always wanted to go to his grave. I actually always wanted to go. I still on my list, my to-do list, to go to Reverend Gary Davis's grave in Queens, and I think you and I have to do that at one point. But yeah, I was just down there, and it just all came together, and I was like, oh my God, his grave site is like right down the road. And of course, I went in there, and there's a couple other people that are really famous that are buried there that usually people are like, looking for. But this lady was really nice. She was like, oh yeah, I'll give you a little map. And I went out there, and it was just a really, really hot, summer day. And I just sort of paid my respects, and it's just like a little plot, and amongst a lot of other plots, and sort of had a little trouble finding it. And then once I did, it sort of just laid down and was like, wow, this is like spooky. Like, this guy's skeleton is like right under the ground right here. And so I made a selfie, like, wow, that was really trippy. And then I didn't think about it. And then my sister actually was like, wow, that'd be a great album cover. And I was like, well, I'm not kind of the one that puts my actual picture on the cover. I mean, we had this guy, Jay James, make me into, the aspirational Reverend Freakchild character with the many arms there, kind of thing, for the cover. But yeah, it was like my little, like, ode to, like, hey man, the blues and the psychedelic blues is a real thing, and you can hear, like Big Steve talking about that, like, Pigpen was really breaking ground at the time. I mean, we just take it for granted now, but granted, excuse me. And, but it was kind of, here's a, I can hear my dad in that too, like, white boy playing the blues. That's what they call rock and roll. It's like, but my dad was the guy who, took me to see Bo Diddley and Johnny Hooker and all these guys, and really had an appreciation for that. So when all this Black Lives Matter stuff, it had been on the radar for a while, but when it got to the big thing of, there's nothing else going on and people are watching these protests and there's nothing else to do, so people are going to these protests. It actually was Father's Day just, long ago. I called up my dad and I said, hey, happy Father's Day. And I said, thank you, Dad, for turning me on to the blues, because it actually gave me a window into the African-American experience, which is, it takes a little study. You gotta, if you're living in the suburbs, you don't really have a window into that world, so it can be, a cultural education too. And I think the Grateful Dead were open enough to that, because they were tripping on LSD being like, hey man, everything's cool, man.
Yeah.
They had somebody like Pigpen being like, hey man, these tunes are really cool. And they were like, oh man, that's awesome blues music, and Garcia playing all that folk music and all that stuff. And
one of the things I wanted to talk about was the artwork on the album.
Oh, yeah.
I love the cover. Who did that cover?
This is my friend Jay James McFarland, and he is he does like what do they call it, graphic novels, and he's an accomplished cartoonist, and he's also a very accomplished artist, and he makes that distinction. He does cartoon work and he does art stuff, and we got together here in Boulder, and friends of friends, and actually it was on this album Dial It In that actually Mark Caron made a guest appearance on one of the tunes, and that's when we started working together. It was a couple albums ago, and we had gotten with this record label, and just like the regular story, right? Like, you run out of money like sort of halfway through doing the music and the art, and the guy that was doing the art with the record label was like, oh man, I can't get you what you want. And I was like, what are you talking about, man? Like, I'm not going to put this thing out unless it's up to snuff. And James and I just talked, and he saw it, he got the vision, and he actually did this whole beautiful, I'll send you, I don't know if I ever send you the vinyl, man. I'll send you some vinyl, man.
Oh, that'd be great.
He did this huge, I like to call it a centerfold, but that's, speaking to my 70s upbringing. But, it was a fold out of this huge psychedelic picture of, he went into all the songs, and there were some cover songs and blues tunes and a lot of originals in there, took phrases out and made pictures of the phrases and put it all into this like mandala thing. So I'm looking at it like, oh my God, that's a song lyric that he put into imagery. And it's really trippy. And then of course with the song lyrics on the other side. So he actually finished the album artwork and the design for the outer sleeve at a real great price, like a friend price. And I said, man, let's work together. So he did a little bit of work for the next album. And then this album, I said, man, I'd really love for you to do more of your art. And so, I had this vision. I was actually on retreat, meditating for days. And I looked up, and there was this guy, Fulculpa, who's, I don't want to get into all the nuances of Tibetan Buddhism, but he's floating in the clouds up there. And I thought, oh my God, it'd be so great to have like a Reverend Freakchild thing, and it's got these many arms, and for those that are listening and checking this out, or for not, there's like a peace sign, and there's a yoga mantra that has all the symbols of all the religions. There's a cell phone with the Grateful Dead, logo, and there's a one arm hand holding a harmonica, and one holding a sacred text, and then one hand's holding the Buddha, and the Buddha's pointing to the moon, and that's a classic thing. And then there's this dragonfly that's all around, and then there's these 8 auspicious symbols, and then there's this moon and the sun. So there are all the sort of deeper meanings in there. And then we went back and we did this. The back cover is a skeleton where it's sort of mimicking this guy Milarepa who had like 100,000 songs and lived in Tibet and sang these songs of realization. But it's also a skeleton, like, you know, a Grateful Dead skeleton. And then we have, you know, the Uncle Jam guy laying down on a Buddha bed, you know, on the inside, and some more dragonflies. And then, like you said, me at the gravesite of Ronald McCarran, Pigpen. And then there's an actual, that's me, that's actually a real X-ray of me. And then
really?
James put this
really?
butterfly X-ray in there. So it's like under the CD. So, yeah, he just went to town on it, and we really had a fun time. We were actually thinking about, you know, we submitted some stuff to the Grammys this year, and we were thinking about submitting this, and I don't know if our PR people did that or not, but it's a wonderful package. And, you know, it was almost like, okay, this is the 12th album here, and maybe we'll put this out as like the last CD. And it's got some great players, you know, Melvin and Mark, and some great guys from New York, Chris Barker, who's played with Bob Dylan. So, you know, all the New York name dropping. But it's a great album, and it's some beautiful blues tunes and some Grateful Dead tunes and some, you know, a couple John Lennon tunes too, the version of Imagine. Stuff that, like, you know, I kind of like took a step back and was like, hey, these are cover songs that I always have loved, and these are people that I wanted to, like, you know, be when I was a kid. So let's put this out. You know, who knows how long CDs, I don't know if the next project will be even put out as a digital thing. You know, might just put it out as, or excuse me, put it out as a physical thing. We might just put it out digital. So, you know, yeah, I'm really happy with it, man. It's really like a piece of art. And that's what happened with the other thing. You know, like, I actually put some money into that Dial It In album myself, because I was like, man, I'm not going to put this out unless it's like a piece of art. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, maybe that's like a little crazy of me, but, you know, I feel like art is long and life is short, so as well, you know, do something that's going to maybe help some other sentient beings, but also be a beautiful thing that might just be sonically and visually, you know, inspiring to, you know, the next generation or this one or whatever. You know, I mean, maybe it'll all get sorted out after my, you know, my demise at my funeral. People will be like, wow, that was actually a pretty cool album. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to hear that you're happy with it, because, you know, I think the artwork works on a lot of levels. I mean, you're getting iconographic images from Buddhism and from blues and from Grateful Dead, and you're bringing it all together. And you know what?
Yeah, so you get it, man. Like, and if you know just a little bit of each one of those things, it comes together, and you're like, wow, there's a lot of commonality here, man.
Yeah.
You know, the skeletons and the psychedelic vision, and then the blues music that's sort of, you know, speaking to wine, movement, song, and also mortality, you know. So, yeah.
Well, I'm also happy that it carried through to the music, too, because, you know, a lot of, when people cover the Grateful Dead, I think they're just doing it just to make another notch on their resume a lot of times. Mm-hmm. You know, and I don't get that sense listening to Bodhisattva Blues. And I think it's because of the way you've arranged the songs and you bringing that bluesy edge to it. It's not like Friend of the Devil as interpreted by a Nashville bro country guy.
I hope I expressed, you know, how much I love these tunes. And, you know, I got actually waylaid. There was a fire in California, I mean, a couple of years ago, and I couldn't get over the Sierra Nevada, so I just checked into this hotel. And I just played Black Peter. I'd always kind of like been interested in that song, like over and over and over for like 2 days. You know, it was beautiful. I went hiking one day and I came back and I was like, wow, I really learned that tune. And that bridge is so weird. And I thought, this is like the bluesiest tune I have ever heard. Like, this is sadder than any blues song. Maybe, you know, Blind Willie Johnson's, you know, Cold Was the Ground, Dark Was the Night, you know, the one they sent out in the Voyager spacecraft, was just like this instrumental, beautiful slide tune. Is like, I think that's the saddest blues tone I've ever heard. Like, oh my God, beautiful. But Black Peter's just, I mean, he's sitting there on the deathbed with this guy, and then there's this change around in the bridge, and then they go out, like, let's go and see, you know, and you're like, how did the Grateful Dead get away with playing this song for so many years? Like, this is a really heavy song. You know, it's a beautiful ballad, but like, not like a building ballad. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, you know, you can tell I really dig these songs, and I think, you know, I wanted to do justice to them. And, you know, I met Melvin Seals through Mark Caron, and he was like, yeah, man, you know, there's some good stuff here. Like, maybe I'll ask Melvin, you know, if you think it needs some organ, and I'd be like, that'd be great, man. So Melvin played on 3 tunes. He did a version of Black Peter with us, the Big Boss Man, which was just kind of a fun jammer. And then we did a version of the Beatles' Your Blues, which was an interesting kind of a, talk about bad songs. I mean,
that's
it's
a
blues
heavy
tune.
song.
And, it's really heavy. I mean, he's talking about suicide, and then you go back and you listen to the tracks, and the last lyric that Lennon says, he says, I feel so suicidal, I even hate my rock and roll. And you hear Ringo swing it. You can hear him be like, "Oh, John, it's not so bad." Put a little dotted 16th on there. And I'm like, the first time I heard that, I was like, "Oh my God, that's brilliant!" Like, it's such a heavy tune, and then he's lightening it up just with the music. And so we actually were in the studio trying to like do a really super, John Coltrane giant steps, jazz thing as an outro, and it just wasn't working. And we took a break, and Chris Parker, who's been really just this wonderful sort of, he's like, ace up my sleeve. I mean, this guy's played with, and we just made friends, and he turned around to me, Jesus, about 5-6 albums ago, and said, "Man, we got to do a project." And I was like, okay, man. Like, and this guy's played with Bob Dylan and Joe Cocker and all these famous people and jazz people and Stevie Wonder. And I was like, yeah, man, let's do it, So anyway, we took this break, and he said, this jazz thing's not working. And he's a jazz drummer. And so he's sort of telling me, like, "You're not a jazz player, dude. You have some humility." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know." And he's like, "You're the Reverend. Why don't we do a gospel outro?" And I was like, "Oh my God, that's so perfect." So we did this, turn around into the like, "Hey man, when you hit bottom, then you bounce back, and life can be good." And then talking to Melvin about doing the changes, he's like, "You want me to do a gospel feel over blues changes?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're getting it now, man. Like, we're trying to mix the worlds." And, because Melvin grew up in the church, and he wasn't really party to all that stuff that, Garcia and John Conn were doing backstage, before and really after the show, and Melvin's just such a down-to-earth guy. And he was like, "Sure, man. Okay, I'll try it," and it just came out wonderful. I mean, the guy is just a genius player. I just love his playing, and I kind of gushed at one point. We had several conversations about different stuff, and I said, "Man, dude, I grew up listening to your stuff. Like, I just have to say, I'm a huge fan." And he's like, "Hey, come on, man, we're just all people," And I was like, "This guy is so super cool," So it's just such a great vibe there, And I will have to say, some of the stuff took longer than the usual East Coast kind of guys, because I think, those guys are, doing some other things out there, and it gets a little smoky and a little slow, and, and it's like, "Hey, dude, it's been a couple weeks." And you go, "Oh, yeah, man, I worked on a version of that, and, I did something else, and, oh, yeah, I'm getting on that." And you're like, "Okay, man, whenever, take your time."
It sounds like
and
I'm sorry. I was going to say,
No,
it sounds like you're really open to the idea of experimentation in the studio as you're going along.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love that. I mean, those stories about like Anthem of the Sun. I know everybody's sort of listening to the Working Men's Dead, and the Angels share of that, where they sort of came. I think Mickey Hart talks about coming back down to earth, and actually recording kind of a more rootsy rock and roll album. And but Anthem of the Sun, I mean, that stuff, like they're just experimenting, and we've got some good people in the studio that are open-minded, and Hugh Poole and I worked on a bunch of albums together, and he's always challenging me, and I'm always challenging him, and getting players. I think what I have is like, I find people that I trust already, or I admire their music already, and say, "Hey man, we hired you because you are a talent in your own right. Go and do your thing, man. Like, for me to tell you how to do it, I could do it that way, like I play some organ. I can play it the way I want to play it, but I can't play it the way Melvin Seals plays it, man, and you get the tracks back. And even something like, the ending to our version of Big Boss Man, like there's this crazy little, like, arpeggiated, like, walk down thing that Melvin Seals does at the end of the track. It was just like, there was some empty space, like, when you're tracking things, I don't want to get too technical here, but people that are musicians know that, like, okay, there's the basic tracks, and then, they end, and then there's somebody takes a guitar solo, and then it, like, ends in a different place, and you're sort of like, oh, wait, like, that doesn't really, wait, that was the ending. And Melvin just sort of put it all together, and he's like, and right when the last drum hits, and you're like, dude, that was like a throwaway ending line that just was brilliant. You're like, I could have never even thought about doing that. I wouldn't have even thought about putting that in there, and he put it in, and it makes the tune for me. I'm like, wow, what an ending. So yeah, I mean, it is. I am really a fan of experimentation, and I did a lot of experimentation within my own mind with some chemicals, and I'm going on. I actually just passed 14 years sober, and now I'm doing a lot of experimental stuff with Buddhism, and sitting on the cushion and getting farther out than I've ever been, on any kind of drug, and it's much more stable too, which, if that makes sense, But
are you going to take the music past the blues into something else ethereal and Buddhist?
Well, I've tried to write some of those songs, like there's a tune called All I Got Is Now, and there's a tune called Dial It In, which is on the Dial It In album. I actually got my old good friend, Garrett Dutton. A lot of people know him as G-Love. He guested on that. It was nice to reunite with him, and got Hazel Miller, who's this wonderful soul singer. So it's hard to get away from the blues, because I grew up with that tableau. But I think the experimentation thing is because I also grew up with classical music. My mom was, taking me to the opera and to symphony, and I still go to the symphony with my girlfriend, although, it's shut down here with the pandemic, which is just so surreal to me. I'm like, wow, that's right. Like, even if I wanted to go do something, like, there's nothing going on, So I'm open to all that kind of stuff, and a real fan of, John Cage and all those kind of experimental guys too, not only because of my, I think, psychedelic experience that I've had, but also because of, like what you're saying, like, taking it out to what they call songs of realization, which is, it's kind of like a Buddhist tradition. There's this guy Milarepa in the Tibetan tradition, they had these like wandering yogis and these enlightened dudes that would just sort of sing these, poems to you, and you'd be like, what? And they're sort of on the edge of their enlightenment, trying to help others by singing. And I'm like, well, that's aspirational for me. I mean, I don't know how much realization, I'm not professing to be enlightened. I'm just sort of on the path, hoping that if I, have some kind of realization, it helps other people, and then helping other people maybe helps me, kind of a thing. That's sort of the reciprocal thing that happens there. But yeah, I don't know. I talked with one of my meditation instructors, and he was saying that, sometimes you got to let that naturally mix, and it naturally mixed with things like All I Got Is Now, which is really about the 4 thoughts that turn one's mind towards the Dharma, or Dial It In was all about, letting the 8 worldly concerns go and embracing the 4 immeasurables. But, this is you're going to have to air this thing on Sunday. I'm going to get too preachy here, But I don't know what you expected. You got the Reverend Freakchild here, but...
Well, you mentioned those songs, but they're still sort of in a blues context. And I guess my question is, do you see yourself moving beyond the blues? Musically.
Well, I feel like I'm... What? Yeah. What? Beyond? You mean...
musically.
Well, musically. I don't know if I could... like I was saying that story about Chris Parker, and Chris has really made a great transition into being, he's an amazing enough drummer that he can play jazz gigs, and keep up with those guys. And I remember seeing Bill Frisell years ago at some conservatory in Seattle, and I was hanging out there for summer and part of a fall before it got too rainy, and I left, and seeing him sight reading, and I have I'm dyslexic, so I can't really read music like that. So when my mom would try to teach me piano, I had a good enough ear that I would like listen to it and I'm like, okay, that's how it goes. Like, Chopin prelude, okay, yeah. And then I, be like, okay, that little symbol means this little shape of my hand, but I couldn't really, it was really kind of frustrating for me. But I think I just keep coming back to the blues because that's what I can play. It's like I pick up my, National Steel, and it just sort of comes out that way. Although I feel like I've never really get into that real bluesy thing. Like I feel like I got to move down to the Delta and hang out with like Jimbo Mathis and a couple of those guys, Cherde and all those dudes that are jamming down there, and what's her name, Volt, Miss Volt down there jamming on the tunes, and the Burnside brothers and all that stuff. Just to get it in my. Yeah, actually, one night I jammed with Watermelon Slim and Mark Muleman Massey and. Sort of the white boys of that scene, and I always feel like I'm paying a debt of gratitude to the blues, in this way, and it kind of anchors me in a good way. You know what I mean? Like if I didn't have the blues, I'm actually thinking about putting out this because there's been so much downtime. I don't know how much we're going to be able to do a recording session, and we got to have a certain amount of people in the studio just to get the basic tracks down, and then we can send it around for overdubs. So we might do some of that. But there's this just in answer to your question, there's this a mass, like Bach B minor mass was a big thing for me, and when I was actually coming off some bad acid, I listened to that and it really made sense to me and calmed me down, but it's kind of haunted me ever since. And that's not blues-based, but it's still tonally, harmonically, the 12 tones of the Western scale, and there's some pentatonic riffs. Not to get too technical here, I always get too much into the technical stuff, but what I did was went back and I took the liturgical mass, which is the Catholic mass, the transubstantiation of, the flesh becomes the flesh of Christ. And, I think from an outsider's viewpoint, no disrespect, I grew up Episcopalian, which is like Catholic light. It seems like a cannibalistic ritual. You're like, dude, what, you're eating the body? And what?
Yeah.
So it's sort of strange. So we went back and I went actually to Amsterdam, this is many moons ago, and started this project with a friend of mine who was living over there, and it's really psychedelic. I mean, it's hard to listen to even. I mean, it's like music samples and like, but it does. It starts out because one of my friends actually I'm having a conversation with tonight. We were sort of religious, interested in religious studies and religious harmony amongst all people. Not proselytizing anything, but just interested. And we started this conversation, and he was like, "Hey, that tune, that old Lightning Hopkins tune." Oh, Jesus is my needing time. Oh, Jesus is my needy time. And Jesus is my needy time. And it's I think it's based on an old hymn, and Lightning Hopkins like sort of taken from the church. So there's a real play there. Like there's even like Muddy Waters like says, in that interview with Alan Lomax, or maybe it's John Lomax, he says, if you want to know about the blues, you got to get to church. He's talking about listening to some hymn coming out of the church some Sunday, and by the time he gets home, he sort of put a little minor on it, made it his own, and he's singing it at the fish fry, and picking up chicks with it, and taking shots of whiskey, So it's like, where's the line between those harmonic structures? Is it just our mind that sees it as like secular blues music, or gospel-y Sunday morning music? It's like, I'll go down to the Delta, and on my way, in Memphis, I got to stop by, Reverend Al Green's church, the Full Gospel Tabernacle, just down the way from the Graceland, and see them Sunday mornings, But the Saturday night before or that Sunday night, I'm down in the Delta, jamming with the guys down there. So, it's kind of two sides of the same coin. But yeah, I guess that's a long answer to your question. Like, I don't know if I can ever get away from the blues, because I think I'm a little afraid if I got away from the blues, like, where's my touchstone? Like, I'd be way out there in space, man.
Yeah. Well, I forget. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I forget which blues man said blues is a feeling. And it occurs to me that Buddhists will have feelings, but they're not going to attach to them. And I wonder if that's the fertile territory that might take you a little bit outside the blues. Do you see what I'm saying? There's
and I totally dig that. You got I think Brown and McGee said blues is truth, and Sunhouse saying blues ain't nothing but a good man feeling bad, and Robert Johnson, of course, saying blues ain't nothing but a low down shake and chill. You ain't never had it. I hope you never will. But that blues is a feeling. You're right. And that idea of like, feelings are not facts. And in the Buddhist context, you realize like, wow, when I'm in meditation, it's like feeling. It's like you take out the I, and it's like any kind of adjective after that. I am feeling happy. I'm feeling sad. It's like, wow, I'm interpreting that with my mind. These are just feelings, they're not good or bad, it's like, wow, So yeah, I think that the blues does that already, like there's these guys sitting on the plantation, Muddy Waters worked on the Stouffville plantation for 18 years before he moved to Chicago. People forget that. He was the progenitor of this transition from country blues to the electrified blues. You follow Waters, you follow the history of the blues, and then of course, bequeathed it onto, the Rolling Stones and Eric Clapton and all those, the British guys that sort of retranslated it back to, Americans to say, hey, you got some amazing, homegrown music right in your backyard. But, it's this feeling. And I think when you get into the music, you don't have to be a scholar, to realize, like, this is a ritual that's healing. Like, geez, these guys, playing at the fish fry, after working in the plantations all day long, sort of the origins of the blues there, and coming out of that, and the blues becoming this proud thing, and now it's sort of become a museum piece, and maybe even, an embarrassment to sort of the hip-hop culture. They don't want to be like, well, that was the past. But it's like, hey, man, if you don't study your past, you're destined to repeat it. It's like, yep. I mean, I was even watching a Dave Chappelle, special, and one of them, he starts with Muddy Waters, jack, boom, boom, and it's just like the technology changes, whether you're playing a country blues guitar on your porch or, some electric slide, in Chicago, or, you're in New York at a hip-hop club. It's just the technology, it's the same kind of thing, like creating a beat, and like I was saying before, let a lot of these guys bring their drums and their fifes home from the Civil War. That was the technology they had. You got Ortho Turner, like, playing these flute tunes, over these beats. And that's all you really need is like a rhythm and a melody, and it's just changed. Now you got, some huge sound system and some guy, kind of karaokeing before them, with message and meaning that, gets everybody riled up, And I'm not a big fan of the hip-hop culture. It's not my thing, I appreciate some of it, but I usually tend to go back to, like, people like De La Soul, it's like the hippie rappers and stuff like that,
right.
Kind of thing. But anyway, I'm kind of digress off that, but it's a feeling. The music is a feeling, and it's on the edge of our experience, and I hesitate to, like, go spinning off without that, but I do. I come back to the blues, man. Like, sometimes, people are singing these, like, show tunes or religious songs without any blue notes, and I'm like, come on, man. My kingdom for a blue note. I'll give you everything. I'll give my right arm for a blue note. Just some kind of slide up into that, man. Like, make it a little soulful, It's like, I went to India with this guy, Bernie Glassman, who's the Zen master, and, he was born a Brooklyn Jew and worked on a space program, sent rockets to Mars and shit way back in the day, and started meditating and became the Zen master studying this other guy, Matsumi Roshi, and at the end of our trip, we went to India with a whole bunch of other people, some students of his, and at one point they were like, oh, who do you study with? I was like, dude, I took a lot of LSD. I don't know. I'm sober now, but I don't know how I got here. Like, this is a trip for me, and now I've started studying really on that stuff, but at the end of the trip, we were sort of in a big circle, and we were singing some of these, like, singy songs, like, well, look at your mind. When you look at your mind, just relax and let go. Kind of like very sing-songy blues song. And I had a harmonica in my backpack, and so I started just playing a little bit, and it was just like, wow, and then Bernie was like, why aren't you playing that the whole time, man? That's awesome. I love the blues stuff, and it just gives it a little, pardon my French, it gives some balls to something, it's like a little bit of a, like, yeah, that's the feeling, man, like you're saying. So anyway, I could go on and on and on about all that stuff.
I noticed. You're good at it, though.
Yeah, I haven't had my afternoon tea yet either, man.
Wow.
I'm still working off the green tea from lunchtime.
Not even coffee, just green tea.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the green tea going these days. It seems to be this.
Huh.
I was on soda. I worked a day gig at the Ronald McDonald House in New York, taking care of cancer kids, and really kind of doing the Rev thing over there, and raising money and trying to help even some of these families that were, going through really hard times, staying at the Ronald McDonald House. And they had free sodas over there. Coca-Cola was partnered up with them, and they had to do a lot of their own fundraising and stuff. The burgers don't pay for that stuff, so they had to do. But they did give us some free sodas, and I was jamming like 7-8 Coca-Colas a day, man. I was like, it was insane. I'd gotten off drugs, so I was like, oh, I can drink as much soda as I want. And then it started eating up my stomach. I got a bad, like, kidney stone. And so, buddy of mine, this 6'7" Cree Indian. No, he's not Cree. He's a Crow. Crow Indian. He's out of Montana, but he lives in L.A. He works on movies now. He said, man, you got to get on the green tea. It's got more caffeine than soda. You put a little honey in there, and, it's better for you. So I've been drinking that ever since. So.
Good for you.
Simple pleasures, a little bit of my inner addict has to have something to go on, kind of thing.
But you're not attached to your inner addict, right?
I don't know. I identify with that guy sometimes. He was a dangerous character. He still pops out every once in a while and, kicks a hole in a door, or does some fucked up shit. Excuse my language. You keep them at bay. I go to meetings all the time, stuff like that. Yeah, AA is a wonderful thing. And I don't know if you want to put this in the air, but as the Reverend, I always kind of, when it comes to this point, I say, lay your hands on the radio, people. It's going to be all right. If you're struggling with any addictions or rheumatitis or arthritis, anything, just lay your hands on the radio. There's a lot of people out there that want to help you, and if you're struggling with the disease of addiction, hang in there, be tough. A lot of beautiful things happen in this world, and there's a lot of people that can help you out if you just reach out for the help. So,
oh, that's beautiful.
A little public service announcement there. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, before I let you go, is there anything? Are you doing any virtual performances in the near future that people should know about, or something else? Anything else? I
did a bunch of those, and I don't know, just kind of. It was cool. I mean, I'd rather sort of record something and put it out. So I think the biggest thing is, I've just been turning people on to this Bodhisattva Blues album. There's some great blues covers in there, a couple Grateful Dead tunes and Beatles tunes, and one original there about going down to the Delta and sort of honoring all these, psychedelic heroes of mine that are beautiful musicians and amazing artists. And hopefully, we put this thing out in the universe and people enjoy the Bodhisattva Blues, and all the beautiful stuff that's on there and the amazing sounds. So.
Well, thank you, Reverend Freakchild.
Hey.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, man. It was great. Thanks for letting me talk to you there. I get going, but I'm excited about this stuff, and thanks for spinning the disc, and great talking with you, man, and hope everything's well with you all out there in more western Colorado. I mean, this is beautiful. If you don't turn on the news and you just look out the window, everything's kind of cool.
It's funny you say that, because I'm missing the quarantine days. And you know why? Mm-hmm. It's because I didn't have to do any work except for my own writing. And, I've lost that now. It's like,
have to say,
where did that go?
I totally relate to that, because now that it's opening back up, I'm like, dude, I don't feel safe about it. The only, it's like, and I don't know what your politics are, but it seems like everything's shut down, and then you can go to a Trump rally, though. It's like, wait, what? There's a little disconnect here. Am I supposed to wear a mask? And how far away? I mean, even my girlfriend and I went on a hike the other day, and people got too close to us, and it was just like, oh my God, what are we supposed to be doing? So it's like the anxiety, all that. I'm like, part of me, when Colorado kind of re-shut down, I was like, oh, cool, I can relax. I'm just going to sit in my house and play some music.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, man. That's great. It makes me feel not so alone. I'm like, okay, it ain't so bad, man. Like kind of like a little Buddhist retreat, and take advantage of our time here and do some, like you were saying, writing and reading and music and just enjoying life.